Good morning. We're in chapter 6, section 2 of your textbook, page 149. In chapter 4, we learned about demand. As consumers, we demand goods and services. And of course, we would prefer to see lower prices. As consumers, we want to see lower prices because that will encourage us to buy more. But then in chapter 5, we looked at the other side of the equation, the supply side, the businesses. Businesses, on the other hand, do you think they would rather see a higher price or a lower price? Of course, businesses would rather see a higher price because at higher prices, they'll supply more, and at lower prices, they would supply less. Okay? Well, it seems to be kind of like a tug of war. Okay? Who gets to decide the prices? Okay? Is it the consumers or the demand side, or is it the businesses, the supply side, that gets to decide the prices that we pay? Well, we might think that prices are set by the sellers because when we go into a store or go into a restaurant, they're the ones that put the price tags on the items. But is it really just the sellers that set the prices? Actually not. Prices are a compromise between the buyers and the sellers. If you go to In-N-Out and they were selling double doubles for $20, you'd probably walk out. If you went to the car dealership and said, I would like to buy this brand new Tesla for $100, they would tell you to walk out. Who gets to win this tug of war between the buyers and the sellers to set the prices? Well, neither side wins. Prices are a compromise between the buyers and the sellers. When you go to In-N-Out and the double-double is $3, most of us are thinking, gee, I wish I could pay less for this. I wish I could pay less. In-N-Out is thinking, gee, I wish we could sell this double-double for more than $3. So the seller wants a higher price, and the buyers, that's us, we want a lower price. But at a price of $3, what do we say? We say, well, I wish it was lower, but I'm okay with that. In-N-Out is saying the exact same thing. They're saying, I wish the price was higher, but at $3, well, we can go with that. I guess we'll agree with $3. Prices then are a compromise between the buyers and the sellers. Neither side gets to determine the prices by themselves. Well, what does all this have to do with supply and demand? Well, as a consumer, we are represented by the demand curve. We as consumers are represented by the demand curve because we would like to see lower prices, so we'll buy more. And of course, the supply curve represents the businesses being the ones that supply the goods and services. So how does this compromise come about? Well, the book calls this the price adjustment process. So here on the whiteboard, I have the supply and demand for candy bars at Charter Oak High School in a given week. In a given week, the band or the pep squad or the football team is selling candy bars. If the band is selling candy bars, do you think they would like to see a higher price or a lower price? As the sellers, they would rather see a higher price. So let's say they chose $1.50. At a price of $1.50, what happens? Well, at a price of $1.50, how many candy bars would be supplied? How many candy bars would the band director go out and purchase every week to be sold? Well, at a price of $1.50, the quantity supplied is 2,500. Whoops, I forgot to put the word price over here. And quantity down there. So at a price of $1.50, the quantity being supplied is 2,500. Move this over a little bit. What is the quantity being demanded though? $1.50 is kind of a higher price. So at $1.50, how many would be demanded? The quantity being demanded is about 750. So what do we notice about the price of $1.50? At a price of $1.50, the amount being demanded is much less than the amount being supplied. Or we could flip it around and say the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. When the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. I'm going to try to put this down here. I need a bigger whiteboard. When the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded, we have a situation called a surplus. This is called a surplus. And the definition of a surplus is the quantity supplied being greater than the quantity demanded, or of course we could switch it around and say the quantity demanded is less than the quantity supplied. When there's a surplus, that means the price it's too high. Price is too high. And when there's a surplus, that means the price will go down. The price, that's what that dollar sign means. The price will go down. Okay? Surplus says the price is too high. So what if we lower the price? What if we lowered it all the way down to 50 cents? At a price of 50 cents, what happens? Well, at a price of 50 cents, the quantity demanded is only going to be 500. Why are so few being supplied at 50 cents? Remember, at lower prices, the quantity supplied will go down. Okay? The band might say, you know what, instead of selling these candy bars, we're really not making very much money on them. Let's not spend all the hassle of driving all the way to Sam's Club all the time to get more candy bars. We'll just buy a few and we'll see what happens. Okay? So the quantity supplied at 50 cents is only 500. But boy, that's a pretty good price, isn't it? At a price of 50 cents, the demanders, the consumers like you and me, we would have been, that's great. How many are going to be demanded? 3,000 candy bars are being demanded. So now we got another problem. Now we've got 3,000 people, or we've got people that want to buy 3,000 candy bars, right? The quantity demanded is 3,000, and yet we only have 500 candy bars on campus. What do we have now? When the quantity supplied is less than the quantity demanded, when the quantity supplied is less than the quantity demanded, we call that a shortage. There's not enough of them. In this case, we're 2,500 candy bars short. Okay? So what happens when there's a shortage? What happens to prices? Well, that's a signal that the price needs to go up. So we've tried $1.50, we tried 50 cents. What if we tried $1? At a price of $1, what do we notice? Well, let's assume that hits right there. And that's not very straight. Let's try this. All right. At a price of $1, the quantity being supplied is, say, 1,800. And what is the quantity being demanded? Well, it's also 1,800. The point where these two lines intersect, okay, where the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded are equal, that's called equilibrium. When the market reaches equilibrium, that's said to be the right price, if you will. The price is right at $1 because the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded are equal. Okay? At this point in time, there's no longer a surplus or a shortage. Okay? All 1,800 people that wanted a candy bar, all 1,800 people that were demanding a candy bar, and all 1,800 candy bars that the band was trying to get rid of are sold. There's not a surplus or a shortage. Okay? We have reached the point we call equilibrium. And what happens to prices at equilibrium? They stabilize. What does that mean, that prices stabilize? Well, it means they stop going up and down. If there's a shortage, prices are going to rise. Okay? If there's a shortage, prices are going to rise. If there's a surplus, prices are going to fall. And this up and down takes place until we reach equilibrium. A synonym for equilibrium is balance. Okay? The market is said to be balanced when it reaches an equilibrium. And if you remember the old scales, sometimes they call them the scales of justice now. But those balances, and once they balance, the weight on both sides is equal, they stop moving. Okay? Any price below equilibrium, any price below the equilibrium price will cause a shortage. Maybe it's a really big shortage like I showed here. Maybe it's a smaller and smaller and smaller shortage, but any price below equilibrium will cause a shortage, and that's a signal. The price is too low and needs to go up. Any price above equilibrium is going to create a surplus. Again, maybe it's a pretty big surplus like I was showing up here. Maybe it's smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay? But this adjustment from too high and too low will continue until we reach equilibrium. Okay? Once the market reaches equilibrium, prices will stabilize. Okay? That means they're not going to move. Okay? All right. In the real world, equilibrium is not exactly one price. It's not exactly $1. In the real world, the equilibrium price is a range of prices. For example, the equilibrium price for a gallon of milk today is about $3. Okay? That means that no matter what store you go into, milk prices are going to be around $3. They might be a little bit more than 3, might be a little bit less than 3, might be exactly 3, but they're all going to be around $3. Same thing with the equilibrium price for a gallon of gas. Right now, currently around $3 a gallon. At Sam's Club, a little bit less than that. Maybe at the Shell station, a little bit more than that. Okay? But they're all around $3. Okay? This is how prices are created in our economic system. It's the forces, I'm answering the essay question, it's the forces of supply and demand that work together to create prices. Once the market reaches equilibrium, prices will stabilize. It's kind of like Newton's law of motion, if you guys remember your physics classes. Okay? An object in motion will stay in motion, but an object at rest will stay at rest until acted upon by an outside force. Okay? And we know that prices don't just stay the same. Prices do go up. The price of gas goes up. The price of gas goes down. Okay? The price of a hamburger goes up. The price of a movie ticket goes up. Okay? The price of a surfboard goes down in the winter. Okay? What causes prices to change? Well, if prices are set by the forces of supply and demand, the only thing that can cause a change in price would be a change in supply or a change in demand, which is why we spent so much time in chapter 4 and in chapter 5 looking at what causes a change in supply or a change in demand. What happens to the price of surfboards in the winter? Well, they go down. But why? Well, here's why. Here's the supply and demand for surfboards. The point at which they intersect is the equilibrium price. Whatever that price is, that's the equilibrium price. Well, what happens during the winter? The demand for surfboards goes down, right? A change in the consumer's taste or desire for it. So how do we show on this graph demand going down? Well, when demand goes down, the curve shifts to the left. And what happens? The equilibrium price goes down, which is exactly what you predicted, right? You all told me that during the winter, the price of surfboards goes down. Okay? Let's try it this way. The market is at equilibrium. The quantity being supplied for surfboards and the quantity being demanded for surfboards are even. They're at equilibrium. Well, what happens to the demand for surfboards in the winter? It goes down. Is the supply now greater than the demand? Right? When the supply is greater than the demand, when the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded, that means we've got extra, and what's going to happen to the prices? They're going to go down, just like you said. When the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. Okay? Because the demand for surfboards went down. What happens to the price of snowboards in the winter? Well, they go up. Okay? Here's the supply and demand for snowboards now, causing this equilibrium price. But what happens in the winter? People say, wow, I want to go snowboarding. So the demand for snowboards goes up. The curve shifts to the right. Okay? And what happens to the price? It goes up. Again, the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded are equal. What happens to the demand for snowboards in the winter? It goes up. And now the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied. When the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied, that means there's a shortage and prices will go up to get rid of that. Okay? Again, when the demand goes up, okay, the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied, and that means prices are going to go up. So the first thing that can cause prices to change then would be a change in demand. These first two graphs show a change in demand. Demand going up, demand going down. Well, not only can demand change, supply could change. Okay? So here's the supply and demand for watermelons. Okay? Watermelons. What happens to the price of watermelons in the summer? Okay? In this case, it's not a matter of the demand changing. People that like watermelon like it all year long. I like watermelon. Okay? I love watermelon in the winter. I like it in the spring. I like it in the summer, and so forth. But why is the price of watermelon, or why does the price of watermelon go down in the summer? Well, watermelons are in season during the summer. What does that mean? It means the supply of watermelons has gone up because they've harvested a lot more watermelons. So the supply of watermelons goes up. The curve shifts to the right. The curve shifts to the right. And what does that do to the price of the watermelons? It causes them to go down. Just like you knew that watermelons cost less in the summer. Here's the supply and demand for cotton. Okay? Cotton is grown in the South, okay? Alabama and places like that. Okay? Because of a hurricane, the flooding has ruined a lot of the cotton crop. So what happens to the supply of cotton because of that hurricane? Well, the supply goes down. And that means that prices then are going to go up. Let's go back to this side again. Okay. So let's talk about watermelons. The supply and the demand for watermelons are at equilibrium. What happens during the summer? The supply of watermelons goes up. So is the quantity supplied now greater than the quantity demanded? When the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded, that means prices are going to go down. And you knew that. Watermelon prices are lower in the summer. Okay? And what happened with the cotton? Okay? Here's the supply and demand for cotton shirts or whatever it might be. Okay? What happens to the supply of cotton because of the hurricane? A lot of it was flooded. There was a lot of flooding, and a lot of cotton crop was damaged. The supply went down. Is the demand now greater than the supply? When the demand is greater than the supply, or we could say the supply is less than the demand, okay, that means there's a shortage and prices will rise. Okay. So all changes in price, once the market reaches equilibrium, prices stabilize. Unless there's a change in supply or a change in demand. Change in demand. Okay. Prices are set by the forces of supply and demand. But when there's a change in supply or a change in demand, that can cause prices to change. Or it could be both of them at the same time. It could be the price is affected by both supply and demand at the same time. There's the supply and demand for gasoline. You'll notice that the demand curve for gasoline is fairly vertical because gas has what kind of a demand? Inelastic. Okay? So here's the price of gas in the springtime. What happens in the summertime? What happens to the price of gas usually in the summertime? Now the pandemic has made things a lot different, but what typically happens to the price of gas in the summer? It goes up. Why? Well, one of the reasons that it goes up is because there's an increase in demand. Okay? During summer, people drive on vacation. Students are out of school and they drive to the beach. Okay? More people are driving more places, so the demand for gas goes up, causing prices to go up. But here's something you probably didn't know. Okay? In the state of California, we have what they call winter gas and summer gas. Okay? During the summer, when more people are driving, the summer gas provides less pollution. Okay? It's made differently, okay, so that it creates less pollution. In the winter, unfortunately, it creates more pollution. Okay? But people aren't driving as much, so it's not creating as much overall pollution. Okay? Well, what does it cost to produce that summer gas? Well, it costs more. It costs more to make it, to take out some of those harmful pollutants. It costs more to make it. And if you remember from your supply chapter, if it costs more to make it, the supply curve is going to shift to the left. D1 down there. Okay? And you'll see that prices go up even more. Okay? So in the summer, we get a double whammy. We see the demand going up and we see the supply going down, and that creates a bigger shortage, and so prices have to go up. Okay? So all prices are a function of supply and demand. Okay? All prices are a function of supply and demand, and they work together to create that equilibrium price. But equilibrium can change if there's a change in supply or a change in demand. Okay? So this is why we spent so much time in chapter 4 learning about demand and chapter 5 learning about supply, because it's the forces of supply and demand, that work together to create our prices. And for the rest of our lives, we're going to be buying stuff. Well, why does the price of one item cost more than another? Why does the price go up? Why does the price go down? Well, it's because the forces of supply and demand. All right. Excuse me. I know this was a long video, but it does cover all of chapter 6, or all the stuff that we're going to be covering in chapter 6. Okay?